So
That's the joke when the guy Byrne died,
what's
you know.
roll it there, Colette? What does that mean?
Remember, he used to say, when he wanted somebody, he used to say to the, he used to show something on Late Late, he'd say, roll it there, Colette. That was so when he died, the joke was his coffin was on wheels, and the caption was, roll it there, Colette.
No way. What were your Montgomery grandparents like? Can you remember them?
No, never met them.
Lies.
No, I never met my...
Why were they dead?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I never knew them, never met them. They
Where
were...
did James, where did your dad grow up?
My father was born in 1917 in Belfast. He was one of four, 3 sisters and himself. There was Nan, Loretto, Peggy and Esther.
Loretto
Was the nun.
Oh, okay.
And he was the youngest. His father was an engineer who invented this needle for a Singer sewing machine, and he was to go to America to patent it, but he didn't go. His mother I know nothing about. Her name was Molly Dolan. I think her name was Molly Dolan. I know nothing about her.
That's not a Belfast name, is it?
He was called James Lennon Montgomery.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where he was born. I don't know anything about him.
No? We bought you a genetic test.
Well, that'll come up on that.
That'll come up, yeah.
Yeah, have to do that tomorrow.
What about your dad then? What was he? Where did he go to school?
He went to school in... Now that's a good question. He went to school somewhere in Belfast, and then he went to St Malachy's.
What's that?
On the Antrim Road. It was a school in the Antrim Road.
Private school?
No, well, yeah, it would have been a private school. A lot of famous people in Belfast went to St Malachy's, and they were known as Malachy's boys.
Was your dad rich?
My grandfather would have been well off. No, I don't think my father was rich. No,
With the sewing machine and all, he must have.
No, I don't think they were comfortable. All right. Nan married his sisters. Nan married a fella from Dublin called Peter Duffy. They lived in Beaumont. Peggy married a man called Joe Feely. Joe Feely, and Joe Feely was a typesetter in the Irish newspaper. Worked nights, and he had a son and a daughter, Margarita and Brian. I know nothing about them, but you could never go to the house during the day because Joe was always sleeping. And then Esther married a fella called a Coleman, who from in Belfast, but he was a very wealthy man. Made a lot of money out of selling coal, and Claire became a nun, and she went off to be a daughter of charity, and trained in Bangor, in Wales, and was they were known as the butterfly nuns because they wore big headgear, and he very rarely ever saw her in the early years. And he was training to be an accountant, but unfortunately he had a liking for the drink, and he stopped doing that, and he ended up he worked in an aircraft factory most of his life. Aircraft company.
Your dad? Yeah,
short brother in Harlands, and he was
as a what? As a mechanic?
I know, an accountant in it. Mm-hmm. But that's what he did, and then when he retired, they bought an off-license pub, and they ran that.
That was in a Protestant area.
In a Protestant, it belonged to.
Is it Shankill or?
No, Woodstock Road in East Belfast, but it was owned by my mother's sister and her husband, but he died, and my father and mother took it over and ran it for years and years.
Was it popular?
Yeah, that was very popular. A lot of people.
What was it called?
Ahern's Wine Centre.
That was your mum's sister's
husband. He was Bertie. He was
Bertie Ahern.
No, he wasn't Bertie Ahern. He was Christy Ahern.
Okay.
Christy Ahern. But I reckon he could have been related to Bertie because he came from Dublin.
And what about your mum?
My mother was Nora Donnelly, and she had, oh God, how many sisters did Nora? She had Sheila, Eileen, Sheila, Eileen, Maureen, and Sheila, Eileen, Maureen, and Patsy.
How many sisters?
Three sisters, and three of the sisters emigrated to America after the First World War. Her father was a grocer in Belfast.
Greengrocer.
Greengrocer
on Falls Road.
On the Falls Road in Belfast.
Jesus.
And
That must have been rough.
well, he also owned a house just outside Newry called in Florrie Bridge. It was called, and he wasn't above doing a bit of smuggling in his day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and she married. She married my father in 1917.
Where'd they meet? Hey, and you said your dad was born there.
Oh, and they met. No, they got married in 1944.
Where did
The
they
war
meet?
was still on.
The war was still on. They got
Yeah.
married.
Yeah, and then when
Why did your dad not fight in the war?
well, a man from not a man from Northern Ireland, but he was an academic. I think I don't know why men like that didn't go in the war.
I suppose he was Irish.
I don't know. Well, like, why did none of those
Ireland
men?
was neutral, so
Yeah,
he
so I
was
think
fine.
Ireland was neutral. I don't know. In the Second World War, it wasn't like the First World War where men went off and fought in Irish regiments. I don't think in the Second World War a lot of Irish men went off.
And did your dad have an Irish or a British passport?
He would have had an Irish passport, but sure,
He never went anywhere.
he never went anywhere in his life, even though he worked for an aircraft company. I think he went to Scotland a couple of times to do things.
And he was a Catholic.
He was a Catholic, yeah.
Did he care about that stuff?
Oh, they were fanatics.
Tell me.
Him and my mother, mad.
Tell us about it.
Devote.
They hated the Protestants?
No, it wasn't anything to do with Protestants. They were mass on a Sunday, and it was the old school. And Christmas was Lent. You weren't allowed to. It started. You weren't allowed. You weren't allowed to eat sweets.
Did they believe in the divine?
Oh,
God?
they were fanatical. It was of the time.
So they really would they sit around and go, God, like imagine God,
and said the rosary, and
they really believed it. Like.
they believe it was off the time, Peter. That's
No, I know. I'm just trying to get a
yeah.
picture,
That was the time, and they were fanatical about it.
And what about their?
They were, and it Lent. We weren't allowed sweets, and we had to go to mass every morning at 6 o'clock up the road to 6 o'clock mass.
Jeez.
Madness. And then on a Good Friday,
Be a heated church, would it?
you weren't allowed to eat meat on a Friday.
Yeah.
You couldn't, if you went to mass at 12 o'clock on a Sunday, you couldn't eat anything before you went to mass because you were getting communion.
And would they ever sin?
I don't know if they ever sinned. I didn't ask them.
Would they go for a pint?
Not
sinning,
at all. No, they were allowed to go for a drink. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't anything to do with that. But no, it was off the time, and they were fanatical Catholics. But they all were. It was all that was off the time, and the Catholic Church ruled. And
your mum and dad were no more fanatical than their brothers or sisters.
No, they were all the same. All the same. It was off the time.
And where did they meet?
I'd say they met in Fruit Hill Tennis Club in Belfast.
Your dad played tennis?
They played tennis, and then they played tennis down at Florrie Bridge during the summer. And they were married for, I don't know, 40 odd years.
Were they in love?
I suppose they were, yeah. They were mad about each other, yeah.
They had 4 kids. 5 kids.
5 children. They lived when they got married. They lived above a chemist on the Glen Road, and then they moved up to 51 Norfolk Drive, a 3-bedroom semi-detached house, which had 2 big bedrooms and a box room and a small little toilet and bathroom. Toilet and bathroom were all in the one. You couldn't swing a cat in it, and the house was always freezing cold in the winter. 1 fireplace downstairs and a good room.
A good room that no one was allowed.
No one was allowed into, and you only went into there at Christmas or when someone visited the house, or it was a special occasion. That's the, and in the kitchen they extended the kitchen and they put a naga into it.
Which is an oven.
An oven.
Wood burning oven.
Well, it was coal, and the coal was delivered bought coal every week, and you bought slack, which was very old, fine pieces of coal, was always wet. And when you lit the fire, you put the wet slack into the fire, and it gradually heated and heated and heated, and you weren't allowed to touch it with a poker or anything. And behind the fire was a thing called a damper. So to push the damper back, that let the smoke up, and you pushed it forward and went up another way and heated the water.
What about when you peel potatoes? Didn't you wrap them all up and the skins and put them in the back?
You got a newspaper and you put all the old bits of vegetables and rolled that up tight, pushed it into the back of the fire, and threw the slack on top of it. And
What
that
was
was
called?
trying to keep warm. That was the only heat in the house.
How did they end up in Skerries? Your parents lived.
Well, we always went to Skerries for our holidays, and then eventually my father retired, and they bought a house down in.
You could just do that. They could just buy a house, yeah.
Yeah, they bought a house down in.
Was it not expensive?
Well, I suppose they were, but in those days, houses weren't the price they are, not like anything like today. You could buy a house in Skerries for, I suppose, 8,000 or 9,000. But that's gone back nearly 50 years.
What would be equivalent to that today? Like 150 or something?
Oh, it'd be equivalent to be about.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
So
suppose.
they still had Norfolk Drive and then they bought.
No, Norfolk Drive was sold by that stage, and the pub was sold. They sold everything.
They owned the pub.
Yeah, they owned all that, and they sold all that up.
How many years did they have the pub for?
I suppose 10 years, I think. Yeah.
And what age were you when they first got the pub?
I was living in Belfast, so I would have been about 15 or 16.
Any funny stories from the pub?
Yeah, we used to go over on a Sunday just to check it out, and there would be crates of
Was it
bottles.
closed on a Sunday?
Oh yeah, it was closed on Sunday, and there would be crates of bottles of beer stacked 10 high, and we would take 9 crates down and drink from the bottom crate.
Oh, very good.
Put the bottles back.
Who's we?
My sister and John O'Reilly and myself, and we drive over just to check the place out. And years later, my father told me, I know you were drinking out of the bottom crate. How come you only would drink a bottle or two?
And that's mad. And then so they moved down to Skerries like when they were like 60. And how long did they live in Skerries for?
Oh no, they lived in Skerries. What do I say? I'd say my father lived in Skerries for about 10, 15 years.
And was he known about the town?
Yeah, sure. He started Skerries Credit Union.
Tell us about that.
Well, that's he and a few other men got together and started a credit union in Skerries.
It was a British concept, right?
No,
it wasn't really here, right?
No, the credit union, World Credit Union, started in Germany.
Oh, okay.
They owned fishing fleets and everything in Germany. It was a German thing, and it was big in America. It's big all over the world, but it was big in Northern Ireland, not so big in the Republic, but it got bigger and bigger. Then the big credit unions started, the Garda, the Health Service and all that. But Skerries Credit Union grew and grew and grew. It started off with about 5-10 members. I don't know what the membership is today. And they had the school. They started in the old school in Convent Lane every Friday night.
Yeah.
And they're big, and it's different now today. So.
And what else, did he have any friends that we might still be around Skerries now?
He was friendly with Cathal Boyle and.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Ah,
and
so your dad was friendly with Cathal Boyle.
And
it never made sense to me that you were friendly with Cathal Boyle.
And
okay.
And who were the other men that were all involved in the Cathal Boyle and Seamus Murphy and I can't remember the name.
Seamus Murphy from St.
No, it's different. Seamus Murphy.
And did your dad still religiously go to mass?
Oh
in
yeah,
Skerries?
they went to mass every Sunday. Yeah, mass.
Who was your mum? What did your mum do in Skerries?
She didn't do anything.
Just chilled.
Oh, she played bridge. She's a good bridge player.
Big bridge club down in town now. Did you see that?
Yeah.
The
She
first
played
show.
bridge with Omar Sharif.
Don't know who that is.
He was very famous actor.
Mm.
She played with him down in Killarney one year.
And what happened in the end with your parents then?
Well, my father died, and my mother.
Tell us about the day he died.
He died one Friday afternoon. He was coming home from. He had retired, and
Well,
he
he
was
retired 15 years at this stage, right?
No. He was he was working up in Drogheda in a place called Harvest Millen.
He was still kind of work. What age
But
was
he worked
64?
as an accountant, and then he got ill. He got ill a couple of times, and then
What kind of illness was it?
heart. But sure, he did all the wrong
Well, he
things.
got palpitations or something.
He had a heart attack one time down in Galway when he was down visiting my brother. But he was supposed to not smoke and not drink and not eat butter and all these sort of things. But he did all the wrong things. And he retired on a Monday. He had a retirement party on a Monday afternoon. What time of the year I don't remember. Well, he died in November. Yeah, and on the way home he took ill, and he rang me. He was in the house next door, and he said, "Will you do the credit union tonight?" And I said,
"What does that mean? Do the credit union?
Would you go down and do the credit union?
Stand there and take people's money.
Take the money and write out the dockets."
Yeah.
And he had a bag to do it all in. Connor has the bag now, and he died that night. And that was
Where in the house?
No, in Drogheda Hospital.
Oh, he was brought up by an ambulance.
Yeah, the ambulance took him out as I drew up, and
What's the last thing he ever said to you?
I don't know. I can't remember.
I think you told me before.
Oh, he said, "Watch that Paddy fella. He'll ruin your mother." I don't hope Paddy never hears this. And then my mother was living in.
Was your mother devastated, or was it seen coming?
Oh, she was, of course. And then
So it wasn't something you'd all expected.
No, It was the same year Louise and I got married that year, and he died that year. And the Retro had come home for the wedding, and had to come back home for the funeral.
Unreal.
And it was
84, right?
It was really expensive because in those days you just didn't jump on airplanes like you can do it today. And he
so Loretto came back and then
went back again.
What was the funeral like?
I don't remember what the funeral was like. I don't really remember.
Was it big?
It would have been. He would have been well known around the town. And then she was living next door. She was living in number 9 on her own, and then she changed houses. We were living in Shinnick, and she moved into Shinnick, and we moved into next door.
Why? Because it was smaller?
It was smaller. She couldn't cope with the big house and the heat, and everything was wrong with the house. But she asked that we had just done all the house up in Shinnick, and then she moved into Shinnick, and we moved up next door, and we had to do an awful lot to the house because it was the heating wasn't right, the windows weren't right. So that was it.
And then your mum, what happened to her?
Well,
how long did she survive?
I think about 10 years, yeah.
And she died in Balbriggan nursing home, right?
She died in Bedford House, yeah.
So
that was the end of that.
That's 20 years ago. It's 2 more.
Oh no, that's no.
Your dad's dead 30 years.
My father's dead 42 years.
No way.
Yeah.
Jesus. No,
Sure.
no, that couldn't be right.
But sure, he died the year we got married. We were married 42 years.
1983.
We were married. What's this? 20? No, he were 41 years. He's dead.
Jesus. And your mum died.
My
in
mother died
1994.
in 90. I think my mother's 15, 20, 23 years dead.
Wow.
More.
Wow. Alright. Good
Okay.
stories.
Right.
I think next time we're going to talk about houses.
All right. I'm talked out.
That's a good one, right?
Right.
Houses.
Over and out, Jack.
No, but houses is a good topic next time, right?
All right. 10-4 rubber duck.
What are you watching?